You say that's the right thing, but I see you all the time.
Hey everyone, my name is Allie and welcome to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing a recommendations video for fall but with a twist. So I really wanted to sit down and kind of make a fall recommendations video. I know a lot of people are doing it right now and I feel like I don't really have that kind of video on my channel. But I didn't want to just sit here and tell you guys what to read for fall. I kind of wanted to have a bit of help with choosing what I should recommend to you. So like any regular Joe Schmo, I turned to Pinterest and I searched up fall quotes, and I looked for any of the quotes that would inspire me to find some books that are on my shelves that I've already read and correlate the two together. So use the quotes to find the books, basically. So I found 8 different fall quotes and I will be recommending 8 books for each of those quotes. So now I'm going to bring out my trusty and handy laptop and I'm going to be reading the quotes from here and then recommending the books. So the first quote is, "Life starts all over again when it gets crisp in the fall." And that is supposedly said by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I don't know if that's true. Sometimes when you're on Pinterest and you're looking up quotes, they're sometimes misattributed, so you never really know if it's actually said by the person that they're saying it's said by. Regardless, I did pick out a book for that quote, and because it's about life starting all over again and kind of having a fresh start, I decided to go for The Start of Me and You by Emery Lord. And I just recently read this book and I loved it. It kind of started off a little slow, but it really picked up super quickly, like within the first few chapters. And now it's one of my new favorites. And it's definitely about rebirth, regrowth, and kind of about finding who you are and who you're meant to be, especially after a tragedy. So basically, this book is about a girl named Paige and her first boyfriend has tragically drowned. And she's kind of living through the aftermath of that. I think it's a year after the event happened, and she wasn't really with this boyfriend for a long time, but now she's kind of known as the girlfriend of the boy who drowned, and she's trying to step out of that label and find herself and figure out who she is. And this book definitely explores grief and anxiety and depression and just like everything that kind of comes along with being a teenager. And while there are some more fluffy moments, it is definitely a more serious contemporary. Okay, so for the next quote I have, "The trees are about to show us how lovely it is to let things go." So for this quote, I wanted to focus in on the letting things go aspect, and I chose Labyrinth Lost by Zoraida Cordova. This book is also great for Latinx Heritage Month and the Latinx Book Bingo Readathon. So if you want to read this one during the months of September and October, it would be perfect. Also, this is an urban fantasy about a bruja named Alex, and she is not very comfortable with having her powers. She wants to be normal. She does not want to have these powers burdening her, and so she tries to get rid of her powers, but instead she gets rid of her family and everyone she loves. So in order to get them back, she has to go on a quest and retrieve them from Los Lagos with a boy that she isn't really sure if she can trust. Labyrinth Lost is one of my favorite books. I love the setting. I love Alex as a character. So I think it'd be perfect to add to your TBR if you're looking for some more spooky reads for the Halloween season. So the next quote is, "I see the turning of a leaf dancing in an autumn sun and brilliant shades of crimson glowing when a day is done." And that quote is attributed to Maddie Elliott. So for that quote, I wanted to kind of focus in on more of the imagery and the colors that are mentioned within that quote. And so I chose An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This is definitely a book I would have recommended anyway for the fall season. I feel like it's the perfect book to read if you're in the months of like September, October, November, even December. So anytime during like the fall month where the leaves are changing, this is just perfect for that time of year. Also, I feel like with the colors, it definitely correlates to the main character's love of painting. And this book is about Isabel, and she lives in a world where there are fairies. And she is a painter, and she's kind of like one of the more prominent painters of fairies. And one day she's painting a portrait for Rook, the Autumn Prince, which is like perfect for the autumn time of the year. She unwittingly paints human emotion into his eyes, and that is a huge no-no. You should not be doing that. And so he has to kind of take her away and figure out a punishment for what she's done. I really loved An Enchantment of Ravens, and I love Margaret Rogerson's writing. She just has a beautiful way of putting words together. And if you're looking for like the perfect autumnal read, this is it. I mean, we even have an autumn prince. It's just perfect. The next quote is very short, and it is, "Autumn killed the summer with the softest kiss." So for this one, I wanted to kind of focus in on the death and the romance within the quote, and I chose The Wicked Deep by Shea Earnshaw. This book for me is basically London Grammar within a book. Like, if you like the band London Grammar, you're going to love The Wicked Deep. This book is set in a small reigning town where it is actually cursed by 3 witches that were drowned I think about 100 years ago. And every year those 3 witches come back and they drown boys from that town as retribution. The witches take over the bodies of the girls within the town in order to act out their curse, and this year they chose the main character, and I loved this book. I loved the entire journey it goes on. It's so deep and brooding, and it feels like a rainy day. And this book is so immersive within the setting. You really feel like you're there when you're reading this book. And so I feel like any sort of immersive fantasy-esque kind of book, especially if it has to do with witches, is perfect for the autumn season. And also, if you are planning on reading this, I totally recommend listening to London Grammar either while you're reading this or maybe after you've read it. London Grammar and The Wicked Deep are kind of a match made in heaven. The next quote is another short one, and it says, "Autumn approaches and the heart begins to dream." So for this quote, I kind of wanted to focus on the dreamlike aspect of the quote and also autumn as a transformative season. So for this quote, I kind of dug deep into the backlog and I chose The Iron King by Julie Kagawa, and this was one of my first favorite urban fantasies. This story is about Megan Chase, and she thinks that she's completely normal, but one day her brother is captured and taken to the fairy world, and she has to go on a quest to get him back. And along the way, she finds out truths about herself, her friends, and her family. There's also a bit of a hate to love aspect with Megan and one of the fairy princes, and I love it so much. I read this book back in high school, and I just fell in love with the entire world. I love Megan as a main character. I feel like even though there are bits and pieces that are a little dated of this book, it definitely still holds up, and I think it's a worthwhile read. So if you're looking for a book that's kind of a blast to the past but is about transformative and dreamlike topics, then I definitely recommend The Iron King. The next quote is, "Wild is the music of autumn's wind." So for this quote, I decided to focus on more of the musical aspect, and I went for Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. I feel like historical fiction, especially historical fiction fantasy, is perfect for the fall season. So this book is about Tessa Gray and her introduction into the Shadowhunter world, and there's also a character named Jem Carceres. I love him, my soft boy, and he is a musician. So I feel like that quote and this book are kind of perfect, and this is also a great series to start within the fall season. I feel like the entire series is just perfect for the fall and winter seasons. And if you need a music recommendation, I definitely would go for Agnes Obel. I feel like her music is just perfect for this book. The next quote is, "I'm so glad I live in a world where there are Octobers," and that's from Anne of Green Gables. So for this quote, I really wanted to focus on the fact that Anne of Green Gables is kind of set in a more historical time period, and then also the fact that it mentions October. And I ended up choosing Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. I'm sure everyone is sick and tired of me talking about this book and this series, but seriously, it's like my favorite series ever. It is just so good, and this book takes place in October. Some of it is in September, but there's also a big chunk of it in October. Also, Stalking Jack the Ripper is a historical fiction and is about the Ripper killings within London at the time. And this book is about Audrey Rose, and she apprentices in forensics, and so she's super interested in autopsy of dead bodies. It has a really great romance, and I actually really enjoyed the mystery of the entire novel, like trying to figure out who Jack the Ripper is. It's a lot of fun to read. I think the best part of this series is definitely the romance, and I love Audrey Rose as a main character. I think she's so much fun, and I love like her entire characterization and her character arc throughout the entire series. It's just a lot of fun, and this is a great first book. And if you're looking for a really good audiobook, I definitely recommend this one. It has my favorite audiobook narrator of like all time, so definitely recommend Stalking Jack the Ripper. Okay, we're on to our last Pinterest quote, and this one is, "Autumn whispered to the wind, I fall, but always rise again." And this one is credited to Angie Wyland Crosby. So for this quote, I really wanted to focus on the word rise or rising. I can't remember what the word is. It's probably up on the screen. And I chose The Queen's Rising by Rebecca Ross. This is a fantasy book that I haven't really heard very many people talk about on YouTube, on Twitter, really anywhere. I read this book earlier this year and I loved it so much. It's one of my new favorite fantasies, and it's definitely more political driven rather than romance driven. So if you're looking for a fantasy that is very, very, very light on the romance, this is perfect. So this book is about Brianna, and she has grown up not really knowing anything about her father or her family, at least on her father's side. When she starts getting visions from an ancestor, she starts to learn a bit more about her family and where she comes from, and she starts to get embroiled into this plot of overthrowing a corrupt and evil king in order to reinstate a queendom into this land. Also, I really loved the fact that Brianna is raised within this school where she has to learn a certain sort of gift or skill. She ends up choosing knowledge, so basically the school is kind of sectioned off into like knowledge, art, music, I think drama is another one. I feel like there's another little like section of the school, and each student learns something different. So it's very similar to kind of like a Hogwarts house or things like that. So if you're looking for a new fantasy to get into that not too many people have talked about, then I definitely recommend The Queen's Rising. Alright, so those are all of my recommendations based off of Pinterest quotes. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know down below, and maybe I can do similar videos in the future. Also follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!
Say that